Listen carefully, because what I'm about to share isn't just about tossing out questions. This is about sparking a real connection, a conversation so meaningful that she feels noticed, valued, and truly understood. Too often, interactions stay shallow. How's your day? Or what do you do? Polite, but forgettable. The magic happens when you move past surface level chatter and create a space where she can open up, let her guard down, and reveal the parts of herself that usually stay hidden. That's where genuine connection begins. It's not about impressing her with clever lines or fast-talking her way through a conversation. It's about creating a space where she feels comfortable, safe, and curious enough to share. If you've ever been stuck in awkward silences or wondered how to get someone to truly open up, you're about to discover a method that changes everything. I'm going to share 14 thoughtfully crafted questions that don't just spark conversation. They build trust, interest, and emotional closeness. But before we jump in, remember, it's never just the words themselves. It's the energy behind them, the curiosity, respect, and presence you bring that makes your questions powerful. Think back to a time someone seemed genuinely interested in what you had to say. Their eyes were attentive, their body language engaged, and suddenly you felt like you could share anything. That feeling? That's genuine curiosity at work. Approaching someone with authentic interest sends a magnetic signal. You matter. Your thoughts, feelings, and dreams are important to me. Curiosity isn't about rapid-fire questioning. It's more like a dance. You notice her energy, read her responses, and adapt. Lean in when she starts opening up. Slow down if she seems hesitant. Ask follow-up questions that show attention. When your curiosity is authentic, it shows not just in your words, but through tone, body language, and timing. That's the foundation of trust, and without trust, even the best questions fall flat. Now, imagine a conversation where your goal isn't to impress, but to truly understand her perspective. Maybe she talks about a passion, a challenge, or a dream. Instead of jumping in with advice or turning the spotlight back on yourself, you might respond, "That's fascinating. What led you to feel that way?" Or, "How has that experience shaped you?" These aren't just questions, they're invitations. They say, "I'm genuinely interested, and you're safe to share." Genuine curiosity also signals quiet confidence. Not the loud, attention-seeking kind, but the calm, grounded assurance that says, "I'm secure enough to care about what you think." That kind of confidence is magnetic. And here's a bonus. This curiosity also benefits you. Each time you listen intently, you grow in empathy, patience, and understanding. You become a better listener, a more thoughtful friend, and a more engaging partner. Before your next conversation, ask yourself, am I genuinely curious about her, or am I just hoping for a reaction? When curiosity is real, silences feel comfortable, questions flow naturally, and she opens up on her own terms. One of the first keys to connecting effectively is starting light. Avoid heavy topics or overly personal questions at the beginning. Fun, imaginative, and playful questions break the ice, ease tension, and make her feel comfortable. Ask things like, "If you could be any character in a movie, who would it be?" Or, "What's the funniest thing that's happened to you recently?" These starters spark smiles, laughter, and immediate engagement. Light questions aren't shallow. They're the foundation for deeper conversation. They reveal her humor, creativity, and personality. And when she feels at ease, she naturally starts sharing more of herself. Now that you've got the conversation flowing with light, playful questions, it's time to gently move deeper. The goal isn't to grill her with personal inquiries, but to create an environment where she feels safe sharing her feelings, dreams, and experiences. That's where real connection happens. Think about it. How often have you met someone and felt like they were just checking boxes with their questions? It feels cold, right? On the other hand, when someone genuinely cares about your story, you can feel it instantly. That authenticity is magnetic. It invites her to step out of her shell and reveal parts of herself she usually keeps private. A good way to start is with gentle, emotionally inviting questions. For instance, instead of diving straight into heavy topics, you might say, "What's something that's been on your mind a lot lately?" Or, Is there a dream or goal you've been holding on to, even if it feels a little scary? These questions are simple, yet they show genuine interest and allow her to share at her own pace. It's also crucial to listen actively. Don't just wait for your turn to speak. Focus on her words, tone, and body language. Notice the pauses, the excitement, and the emotions behind what she's saying. Respond in ways that show understanding, like, "That sounds really meaningful. Can you tell me more?" Or simply, "I understand." These small gestures build trust and encourage her to open up more. Remember, vulnerability is a two-way street. When she shares something personal, you can mirror it with a related story or feeling of your own. This isn't about competing for attention. It's about showing that you're also willing to be open. That balance transforms a standard conversation into a mutual exchange, creating intimacy and respect. Timing matters, too. Even the best questions lose impact if asked too soon or at the wrong moment. Pay attention to her energy. If she seems hesitant, distracted, or reserved, slow down. Shift to lighter topics or allow a comfortable silence. This shows respect for her boundaries and signals that you're not just trying to extract information. You genuinely care about her comfort. Another key is personalization. As you talk, notice her interests, passions, and reactions. When she mentions something she loves, like music, travel, or a hobby, you can ask tailored questions. "You said you love music. What song or artist really speaks to you?" Or, "Which travel experience has changed how you see the world?" These aren't generic questions. They show you're listening and invested. Personalized questions also keep the conversation dynamic and engaging. When she sees you've noticed the details she shares, she feels valued and unique. This attention encourages her to open up naturally and creates a rhythm where the conversation feels effortless, not rehearsed. It's important to balance fun, lighthearted moments with deeper reflections. Laughing together at funny stories or playful hypotheticals eases tension and strengthens rapport. Then, when deeper questions arise, they land in a space of trust and comfort. Even subtle emotional sharing builds connection. Asking about a moment that made her feel proud, a recent challenge she overcame, or a lesson she learned adds layers to the conversation. You're not just collecting facts. You're discovering her values, her motivations, and the essence of who she is. Ultimately, this phase isn't about checking off all 14 questions. It's about creating a safe, engaging, and dynamic conversation. A few thoughtful examples sprinkled through an authentic exchange achieve far more than a rigid list ever could. By now, you've created a space where she feels safe to share, but remember, connection isn't one-sided. Real conversations are like a dance. You're both listening, responding, and contributing. If you only ask questions without sharing anything yourself, it can start to feel like an interrogation. That's why mutual vulnerability is key. When she opens up about a personal experience, don't rush to respond with advice or change the subject. Instead, offer a small piece of your own story, a challenge you've faced, or a lesson you've learned. This shows that you're present and willing to be real, and it reinforces trust. The balance between asking and sharing transforms ordinary dialogue into something meaningful. Active listening is just as important as the questions you ask. Pay attention to not only her words, but her tone, facial expressions, and body language. If she pauses, seems thoughtful, or shows excitement, respond in a way that reflects your engagement. Nod, smile, or say something like, "I can see why that was important to you." These subtle cues demonstrate that you're fully attentive and invested in the conversation. Timing is another crucial factor. A question that might be perfect in one moment could feel intrusive in another. For example, asking about past relationships or deep fears too early can shut her down. Instead, watch for signs that she's comfortable and open. If she seems reserved, shift to lighter topics or playful questions to maintain a positive, relaxed energy. Comfortable silences are also powerful. They give both of you space to think, reflect, and engage authentically. Another essential technique is reading the room and her energy. Observe her engagement level. Is she animated and enthusiastic, or quiet and contemplative? Adjust her questions and tone accordingly. If she's playful, You can introduce imaginative, fun questions. If she's reflective, lean into thoughtful, emotionally resonant topics. This adaptive approach shows emotional intelligence and builds rapport naturally. Personalization continues to be a game changer. Reference things she's mentioned earlier in the conversation. For instance, if she talked about a hobby or passion, ask follow-up questions. You mentioned painting. What inspires your creativity? Or, how has that hobby shaped your perspective? Bringing up earlier details shows that you're attentive and genuinely care, which strengthens trust and encourages her to share even more. It's also important to blend humor and lightness with depth. Sharing funny anecdotes or playful hypotheticals creates a relaxed, enjoyable atmosphere. This balance prevents the conversation from becoming too heavy while setting the stage for meaningful topics. Laughter early on lowers defenses, making deeper emotional questions easier to receive. As the conversation develops, watch for opportunities to ask slightly deeper, reflective questions. Instead of generic prompts, focus on what matters to her, her dreams, lessons learned, or proudest moments. For example, you might ask, "What's a recent experience that challenged you but also taught you something important?" Questions like this show respect for her inner world and signal that you're interested in understanding her at a deeper level. Remember, you don't need to ask every question from the 14 ways list. A few well-placed, thoughtful examples combined with attentive listening, shared stories, and personalized follow-ups are far more impactful than a rigid sequence. The goal is connection, not completion. Finally, pay attention to her comfort and pace. Not every moment requires a question. Sometimes, simply being present, attentive, and genuinely curious is enough. This subtlety communicates respect and makes her feel valued without pressure. It's the foundation that allows deeper sharing and emotional intimacy to unfold naturally. By mastering the art of timing, mutual sharing, and active listening, you're not just asking questions, you're crafting meaningful interactions. You're building trust, creating comfort, and making her feel seen and understood, which is ultimately far more memorable than any clever line or scripted question list. Now that you understand the balance of asking, sharing, and listening, the next step is advanced personalization. This is where conversations shift from good to unforgettable. When you notice subtle details, her expressions, energy, or recurring interests, you can tailor your questions to show deep attentiveness. It could be as simple as referencing a favorite book, hobby, or story she mentioned earlier. Doing this communicates that you truly value her as an individual, not just another person to impress. For example, if she mentioned a recent trip, instead of the standard "how was it?" try something like, "You seemed really inspired by that trip. What part of it stuck with you the most?" This small adjustment signals curiosity and attentiveness, which makes her feel acknowledged and heard. For example, if she mentioned a recent trip, instead of the standard "how was it?" try something like, "You seemed really inspired by that trip. What part of it stuck with you the most?" This small adjustment signals curiosity and attentiveness, which makes her feel acknowledged and heard. Another way to elevate your conversations is by mirroring her energy and pace. If she's excited, match her enthusiasm. If she's reflective, slow down and engage thoughtfully. This subtle synchronization fosters comfort and rapport, creating a natural flow that keeps her engaged without feeling forced. Humor and playfulness remain invaluable tools. Lighthearted banter creates an enjoyable atmosphere where she feels free to relax and be herself. When paired with deeper, personalized questions, laughter becomes a bridge to trust. People tend to open up more when they feel joy and safety in the interaction. Creating lasting impressions also involves being mindful of your nonverbal communication. Eye contact, open body language, and a calm, confident tone all reinforce your genuine interest. Often, what isn't said matters just as much as your words. These cues signal attentiveness, respect, and sincerity, qualities that make her feel valued and comfortable sharing more of herself. As the conversation deepens, focus on meaningful, reflective questions without overwhelming her. Ask about her passions, dreams, or lessons learned. For instance, What's something you've pursued that challenged you but also gave you the most satisfaction? Or what experience recently changed the way you see things? Questions like these allow her to share parts of herself that matter, building intimacy and trust naturally. Always remember, less can be more. You don't need to fire off a long list of questions to have a great interaction. A few well-chosen, personalized questions, combined with active listening, genuine curiosity, and shared stories, are far more effective. Authentic connection thrives on quality, not quantity. Timing remains critical. Respect pauses, read her energy, and avoid pushing for responses. Comfortable silences provide space for reflection and show you're not rushing the interaction. This demonstrates patience and consideration, reinforcing her sense of safety and trust. Finally, the goal is not simply to start a conversation, but to foster ongoing connection. By combining thoughtful questions, shared vulnerability, attentive listening, and personalization, you create an experience where she feels genuinely seen, understood, and valued. That's what makes your interactions memorable and impactful. In short, the true art of connecting with someone you like is not about perfect lines or clever tricks, but about cultivating curiosity, empathy, and authenticity. When you approach conversations with these qualities, every interaction becomes an opportunity to build trust, comfort, and emotional closeness. So, the next time you meet someone you're interested in, remember, ask with care, listen with intent, share with honesty, and personalize your questions. Focus on creating moments where she feels safe, valued, and genuinely understood. That's the secret to conversations that don't just start. They flourish, leaving a lasting impression and opening the door to meaningful connection.